But why?
No questions. You must take me home.
Phantasm. Is it a fantasy?
I was watching this YouTube video this week to like prepare for this, and it's some Australian dude, and he was saying Coscarelli like that one Food Network Italian woman who says mozzarella.
Put little pieces of mozzarella.
So he was like Coscarelli. I was just cracking up so hard. I was like, Don Coscarelli.
So when we talked about, you know, picking our first Frights, you know, these films, these first horror films from directors, whether the film is a favorite of ours or we feel like the impact really had something to do with it. Phantasm was a real easy one for me personally because I mean, I love Phantasm. It's a really important film for me as a horror kid, you know, growing up.
Phantasm. Is it a nightmare?
But also, you know, looking into Don Coscarelli, the director's background, and his two films before that, and being fans of those films as well, those being kind of lighthearted, kind of comedies, you know, especially Kinney and Company, which was right before Phantasm.
I've got another problem. Mom took Bob to the vet this morning.
But you can kind of see the arc of where he was headed when he got to Phantasm and got to that first horror film. When you look back, you can see how he was creating and putting together the building blocks that would become Phantasm. Phantasm, which, you know, of course, is just a bonkers movie on the surface. You know, released in 1979 when a lot of great horror films and weird horror films had come before, but there's nothing like Phantasm. I mean, for the most part, it's a completely unique film.
It truly is like a dream.
It is a dream.
So many dream sequences.
It is a dream.
In one movie.
Yeah, and it's the kind of film because of that dream quality, and of course the film is a dream.
Right.
But because of that quality, you know, it lends itself to just multiple different interpretations, probably more so than any other horror film I can think of.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great thing about it.
And not a lot of connective tissue to like
Right.
hold these dreams together.
Right.
It's almost just like the dreams are just in the same settings.
Yes.
And
Right.
that's the only connective thing. It's like these take place in the is it called a mausoleum where they have this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like the mausoleum, or they're over here, or this part of town, or
Right.
it's just a song on the side of the road.
Right.
But you know what? It is one of the first, it's probably the only movie for me that does that ending well. The whole it's a dream thing,
Right.
which, you know, it's kind of a wink wink, like, is it? Like, you know what I mean? It's one of those things.
Right. But maybe more than any other movie, Phantasm is the kind of movie where even if you know what the ending is,
You want to
or
watch it.
anything
Yeah,
else,
It's the
like
ride.
it's going
the
to
ride.
it's going to be an experience
Yeah.
for you.
Can I
Yeah.
sidebar that?
Yeah.
I had this weird experience one time, Cafe Society, and I got that movie, and we put it on, and it's just like a screwball comedy, and we were watching it, and for some reason, something happened to the digital file, and we didn't know this. But I don't know if you've ever ripped a Blu-ray or ripped a DVD. It has chapters, and for whatever reason, the chapters, which are cut in very key places, it's not like they cut like mid-sentence for a chapter break. So they're scenes, and it scrambled the movie. It like threw it in the blender, and it scrambled it. And so we watched Cafe Society from beginning to end. We'll be like, this is the most non-linear fucking thing I've ever seen in my life. This is like unreal. Like I've never seen Woody Allen go so hard and not make any sense. you know, and like it blew our minds. And then I think what tricked us, or what made us catch on, was like the second to last scene was the credits. They play the credits, the second to last scene, and we're like, wait a second.
Wow, that's so
wait
ambitious.
a second. Yeah. So that experience always stays in my head. It's like, wow, I was like, you know, it's just a random, unique experience. But it's very, very similar to how I feel about Phantasm. It's this scrambled eggs movie.
Yeah.
It's
But-
it's a fever dream. It's
but
a fever dream.
But everything else about it,
Yeah,
you know,
there are layers to your experience with Phantasm. At least for me, you know, on the surface, like maybe the first time you watch it, and you're just seeing everything from, you know, the kid, something weird's going on at the mausoleum, you know, silver balls flying around, cut off fingers are turning into flies, tombstones are popping out of the ground, and it's all kind of just happening, yeah, in a dream logic state, and on the surface, you're just like, this is really crazy. This doesn't make any sense, but I like it. But it's just wacky. I mean, that's kind of, I think for a lot of people when they first watch Phantasm, I think that might be the feeling, and it was for me when I was a kid. And I just thought, you know, this is just a bunch of weirdness, but it's cool, you know. And this is just this is the definition of a cult movie, you know. This is Pink Floyd on film. I mean, this
kind of very punk rock.
It is.
Definitely,
It is.
definitely.
And remind people, how old was Don Coscarelli when he started shooting this movie?
He's in his early 20s, right?
I think it was like 23 or
23,
24.
yeah.
Yeah, he got his dad's
Yeah.
money, his dad's like rich friends' money,
Yeah.
like lawyers and doctors
Yeah.
in town.
Right.
And, you know, just kind of seat of his pants, like jumped right into the damn
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
I was doing like gravity bongs at 23. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, I was a turd.
yeah.
Oh, dude, I was
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was not making, I was not watching Star
Yeah.
Wars, then immediately
And-
making my own Ewok
Yeah.
stand.
and this was his third film.
Their third movie.
Yes, I think he was 18 or 19 when he made his first film, which was Jim the World's Greatest.
Then, that's when I sort of smacked my head on the strut down there. See right down there? Yeah. Okay. And from then on, it was Freaksville. Man, I was in a World War I dogfight. And here I was zooming through them, man. Then this fucker shot me down.
But yeah, so there's that first experience with Phantasm, and I feel like you know, there are people who maybe don't like Phantasm, and it might be because they never get past that first experience of this just being like a crazy
big
connection
what the
of
fuck?
scenes, you
Yeah.
know. But if you become a fan and you
embrace it.
explore, you embrace it, you explore it a little more.
It also kind of genre hops too a little bit,
It does.
which I think is a good
Sci-fi,
thing. Like, it
horror,
works.
you know.
Yeah.
It has a very Hardy Boys feel to it,
Yeah.
like something
It's got a
spooky,
kitchen sink vibe.
something
Yeah.
spooky going
With
on.
a little
you
bit
know?
of a Lovecraftian,
Yeah.
a little bit,
Yeah.
tiny bit.
But what I really like about it and connect with it is, and what I saw from some of Coscarelli's earlier films, specifically in Kinney and Company, which is basically a movie about kids
Yeah.
living in a suburb in California in the 70s,
Same
just
actor,
having
right?
fun.
Michael Baldwin?
Michael Baldwin's in
Yeah.
it, and they're just kind of like having fun, kind of gearing up to a Halloween coming. They're skateboarding, they're just playing pranks, just doing stuff.
Kids being kids, yeah.
But there's a scene in that film where the Kinney, his dog is going to be put to sleep, and he starts to have to deal with the idea of death.
He's very sick. I'm afraid we're going to have to put him to sleep.
Yeah, he needs a lot of that lately.
No, I don't mean that.
And there's an old man who lives in their neighborhood where he sits down with that old man and asks him about death, and if he's afraid to die, and this kind of idea of kind of making sense of death, right. and Coscarelli has said a little bit of this, but also the best kind of commentary that I've ever heard on Phantasm is that idea.
Would you say the movie is about loss or grief?
The movie is about loss and longing, I think, for me at least.
yeah.
And you know,
Not being
so-
able to escape death.
yeah. So Mike in the film, Mike, you know, one of the scenes in Phantasm that I think is Phantasm is when he's chasing his older brother, as his older brother is riding away in the bike. He's trying to follow his brother, but he just can't catch him. He's gone.
Yeah.
And it's that feeling of, in reality, in the real world of Phantasm, Jody is dead. Mike has lost his parents and lost his brother. And in a sense, when you look at the film from start to end, it's almost like Phantasm is sort of a child's fever dream.
Yeah.
Making sense of death and trying to personify death in the tall man, and then defeat death and bring his loved ones back to him. And then in the end, when he wakes up, he realizes that that cannot happen. But in this child's dream, to try to make sense of loss, he's done something where he's personified it, he's tried to win, and at the end, you see, the older brother at the end kind of triumphantly on top of the hill. We beat it. We beat death. We're together. And then at the end, as real life, you find that can't happen. But in the way that a child tries to make sense of loss, I think Phantasm is really playing on a lot of that.
Yeah.
And so
it really is from his point of view too. The perspective of the movie seems like it's mostly
it's
yes,
all him.
Yes,
all
which
him.
really adds to that dreamlike
like
quality.
when the tall man like turns into a woman randomly, you
Right.
know, towards the end or at the end, and like that kind of age, your dynamic with the opposite sex is totally different.
Right.
You're trying to understand all these weird things.
One great synopsis of Phantasm was written by this author, John Kenneth Muir, who has this book, Horror of the 1970s. But he says something in that commentary about a woman can steal away an older brother just as quickly as a car crash can. And so in Mike's dream, he equates female and sex with pulling his older brother away, pulling everyone away.
That's the opening scene, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that sex is something to be feared but also longed after.
Yeah.
But it's this thing that pulls people away.
Oh yeah.
And so
especially when you're younger.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like
God.
all my friends would get girlfriends in like high school, and then
Yeah.
I'd never see them again.
Yeah.
Yes,
they would
yeah,
just
exactly.
We would say stuck up her butt. That's
Yeah,
what we
yeah,
used to say.
yeah.
Oh, he's just stuck up her butt.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like the weirdest.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, you lose even today.
You lose your
can
friend.
Like,
And then they
like
break
Jared,
up.
we never even see Jared anymore now that he's in love.
Yeah, he stuck up her butt.
Yeah.
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 But anyway, I just remember that as a kid, it was a huge deal. We would laugh about it, but it would suck. And then they'd break up and they'd come back and hang out and we'd be like, we're not even friends anymore. But
Yeah.
I guess you can come to my birthday party.
Oh, you should come crawling back.
Yeah. But yeah, love is kind of strange how it changes the dynamic
It does.
and in our society.
Right.
And it's very strange in this movie how, because it's the point of view of a child, youth.
Yeah, he's a child, of course.
You get all the baggage that comes along with coming of age, film.
Absolutely.
And it's it sucks.
Yeah.
To be that kid.
Yeah, and Coscarelli's films from Phantasm and then the two before all have that quality of just like through a young person's eyes.
That continual theme.
Yes, yeah, and kind of dealing with it, and the idea that with death, we're all children.
Yes.
We have only that amount of
the
understanding.
great unknown.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's the great unknown.
Yeah, it's the fear of the unknown. Do you think, I haven't ever watched Supernatural, but do you think Supernatural, the show, is like a direct result of this movie?
Well, the two guys with the muscle car and all that and traveling around, because this is where
definitely in the sequels.
And actually I have to be perfectly honest, because of this particular connection I have with Phantasm on this theme, because I have to, on a personal level, I have to say that, and I'm sure we all have movies like this, and as crazy it may sound, Phantasm is a film that I return to help myself in hard times, because I've lost.
So like once a week you watch.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But especially when it comes to loss of a family member or something, like in a funny way, like Phantasm is one of those comfort zones for me, where I just wish that you could do something the way that they were able to do it and sort of defeat death, but of course you can't. Now I say all that to say that I think in the sequels, at least for me, it loses that quality.
For sure.
So I never connected the sequels the same way that I do with the original.
Yeah.
But I would say though that I think Supernatural to me reminds me a lot of like Phantasm 2, where they're more like traveling around from town to town trying to defeat the tall man. Yeah.
And I will say this, and like, look, I'm sure there's a lot of Supernatural fans out there. There's a lot of diehards out there. I've only seen a few episodes, but I gotta say, I will give them credit. At least they went for it. You know what I mean? Because like, that's something I feel like if you pitch to a big network, they'd be like, "What the hell is this?" But they had such a strong fan base that you wonder if a lot of that fan base might be Phantasm fans too.
That type of story has appeared in other forms. I know, like Salem's Lot is like similar to that.
Big time.
The like even video games like Castlevania and stuff, where they're just like the family. We have to take care of this problem. It's just like
that's actually very
personal,
very accurate. Like. Yeah, Castlevania is a very good example.
It's got a very Van Helsing vibe to it.
Yeah.
Which like even I think even Halloween has a kind of a Van Helsing or Dr.
You replace
Frankenstein.
The castle with a suburban house.
But go ahead.
I was just going to tee you off to talk about Tall Man for a minute because he's one of my favorite
he's so
on-screen
good.
presences.
Yeah.
What do you think there's the obvious like Frankenstein and like potential references Coscarelli might have used to kind of like paint that, but do you think he casted that role with a type of Frankenstein in mind, or do you think he got the guy or do you know or happen to know?
Well, he had worked with Angus before.
Okay.
Angus is in Jim the World's Greatest, so they had a connection there. But I feel like what makes Tall Man and Angus a perfect villain for Phantasm is going back to what we were talking about before, is everything through Mike's eyes, and that what's scarier and more foreign to a young boy than an old man,
someone he can't relate to.
Yeah, the symbol of something that's so foreign.
Dimensions too.
Yes. And also the symbol of, in a way, a symbol of approaching death.
Yeah.
A symbol of, and so I think that visage of an ancient person, tall, lanky, kind of a walking corpse in a way, and the feeling of it kind of just plays into that whole kind of the Grim Reaper death figure.
Like there's that scene that's so subtle, but it works so well due to camera tricks and stuff. But like when he arrives at the house and he just picks him up like a child, and you kind of just realize how, outmatched he is. Not only is he a young boy, he's going up against an evil presence, but this thing is like powerful.
Right.
Clive Barker mentioned the reason why he wanted his Cenobites to be able to speak is because he hadn't seen too many monsters in monster movies have the ability to have a dialogue with their, the aggressor and the protagonist, to be able to talk about their haunts, their scares, what actually makes everything tick and why it works.
Right.
And so giving the Tall Man a voice is a huge deal in monster movies.
Right.
Frankenstein barely put words together. All these characters that they're based on, Universal horror, like the only one in Universal I can think of is Invisible Man. And that's really just because it's a human who's invisible.
You got Dracula who speaks a lot.
And of course the Bride of Frankenstein is where they give Frankenstein a voice.
Yes.
Which of course was
but
a controversial
idea. But even that was
idea.
still rudimentary.
Yeah.
It was. He
had to be he had to be given those words like Dougie Jones in Twin Peaks.
He
had to be like led to those conclusions.
And of course, and he's not a villainous character.
No.
Right.
Where someone like the Tall Man or Pinhead.
But Tall Man is also a very, is he evil, is he bad? Because the kid is from his perspective.
Yeah. And several actors in Phantasm, like the blonde girl who lets him in and she speaks to the grandmother.
Yeah.
She's also in Kinney and Company and plays Michael Baldwin's little girlfriend.
He really just got the band back together, you know? It seems like.
And in fact, that fear scene where we put his hand inside the box is the only scene that I can think of in Phantasm that seems to be inspired by something. So in the novel for Dune, that fear test,
the fear box.
The fear box. That seems to be the only thing in Phantasm that I can think of that seems to truly be directly inspired.
What are
by
you talking
something.
about? You talking about the Ewoks? You want to talk about the Ewoks?
Hey,
Star Wars had just come out.
That's a very good point.
or you can even say Don't Look Now, the Donald Sutherland movie.
That's
I mean that they had a little.
That's very true.
I have a lot to say about that.
Full disclosure, I don't watch a lot of Star Wars normally, so I always miss that.
It's probably
that's
good.
For sure.
It's probably good.
Yeah. Well, you don't need to.
Yeah.
You got the full Ewoks, and
that's
they
true.
just went from one movie to another.
That's true.
But no, you are right. I mean, like even reading, his book, True Indie, he doesn't really talk about much influence he had on this. I mean, influence that he had writing this movie because. He kind of just seemed to speak from the heart a little bit, as opposed to just being like, well, I'm going to make a Frankenstein ripoff, or I'm going to make a da-da-da ripoff. Like, I can't think of one movie that Phantasm is like.
Yeah.
Prior to it, anyway.
Yeah.
I really can't.
Yeah, there's elements, but it's a totally unique experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that I've met Don Coscarelli at conventions and things like that. I know, Jared, that you have, and he came to do a book signing at the Alamo Draft House in Austin one time, and
he seems like the coolest dude in the world.
He's so cool, and at that, we actually had a brief conversation where we talked about Phantasm and watching Phantasm when you've lost a loved one, and he said something, and I don't want to butcher what he said because I can't remember it completely, but he said something along the lines of that he had a nightmare when he was a kid about death. And that nightmare had stuck with him ever since. And so when it came time for Phantasm, that making sense of death, like coping with death, was the fuel for it. Yeah. So that kind of feeds into that idea of what Phantasm is really all about.
That's exactly what it was. In the book,
and
he
that comes
talks about
across. That really is like what you take away from the movie.
Yeah.
You can tell that's not just the impetus, but that's like the through line.
Yeah. Yes.
It's like this movie's really about grief and really about loss. It's not even like disguised.
Yes. And it's very understandable that someone wouldn't reach that conclusion on a first viewing of Phantasm.
Of course.
It's very, I always get this confused, but like this high concept, low concept thing that I've had reversed my entire career, where if it's high concept, it's like something really easy to understand. Whereas I thought like high concept would have been Dune, But
I thought it was okay, so it's the reverse, huh?
Fucking reverse. Yeah, it is a mind fuck. But yeah, so in like I do a lot of corporate talking heads, like video work, and like I always hear them say like, oh, we're gonna keep it real high level, and that just means surface level end user communication, nothing that engineers would be saying behind the scenes. So like very complex things that the end user wouldn't understand. So it's the same thing, I believe, in storytelling, whereas high concept is an easy to understand concept that's like quick pitch, elevator pitch, easy to understand, break it down, shopping mall, and then you have these low concept movies which generally don't get funding, Star Wars, Phantasm. It's like, yeah, you can tell someone you're making a movie about grief, but then you hand them Phantasm and they're like, oh, I think I don't know. But for me,
are you sure?
After watching it several times,
it
comes across. It's clear, to me. But I also let movies, I don't know if I'm a unique person, but I let movies kind of wash over me first.
Same.
And I like to rewatch movies, especially ones I like. But I like to watch trash too, and like
sure,
stuff
there's a place
that
for
most
it.
people would consider trash. And I still find some value in it, either from a filmmaking side or another way.
Of course.
But like a lot of people discount this movie and like throw it aside, not thinking it's some narrative they can just latch onto, because it's really difficult of a narrative to latch onto. But if you just let it wash over you, like kind of like our mutual love for David Lynch.
Yeah.
They're just more of a mood piece, a vibe that just isn't exactly going to be like what you just saw, last week at the cinema.
It's more of a painting, It's like everybody's
it's an
got
abstraction.
You have different takes on it.
Surreal.
Yeah.
It's all these things that live in other forms of media, paintings and other visual things, and they just don't exist in cinema all that often because they're hard to market.
Right.
It's like, what is this? How do we sell it?
And so that's why I think that in the context of this first Frights conversation, Phantasm was a hell of a swing.
Oh my God.
You know, for a first horror film.
Yeah.
Thank God he didn't have any major oversight.
Oh,
oh God.
It would have been a 20-minute movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
They cut this crap out of here. Yeah. Because they just they want something simple. They want something like, give us the villain, give us the good guys. We know the story.
Yeah.
Okay, we got that. You want to play with grief? Okay.
And especially because, you know, his first two films, especially Kinney and Company, they're much more linear, much more straightforward.
Yeah.
And so, although you can see some of those building blocks kind of stacking up through those films, he really kind of, I think, took some major chances with this movie.
Oh, yeah.
And
the special effects. The special effects. Which are my favorite, some of my favorite special effects.
Yeah, and he talks about in the book, a lot of that was done. Forgive me, I don't remember the guy's name, but he basically had like a magician.
Yeah, the guy who did the
whiz.
spheres, right?
Yeah,
right,
and
right.
he had the idea. He's like,
all
I can make blood come out. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah. Everything is
reverse, shot
multiple.
reverse.
Yeah, everything has multiple elements to it.
Yeah.
That it's not just like, oh, this is just a gag, and we just had to film it, just set up the camera.
Right.
They had to either shoot it in reverse. They had to get at such an angle. They're shooting through glass. They're doing all sorts of old school in camera effects, and there's so many. Yeah, they don't quite. You know, they have like a indie level feel to them.
Sure.
You know, a amateurish feel to them versus like what Hollywood's capable of. But for that time, and watching it back and understanding how much effort goes into each one of those things to pull off on a budget and like kind of like really, like you said, going for a big swing on each one, it's really impressive. It's like super impressive.
And I think Don Coscarelli, with his last two movies that he did before this, were like big push-ups for him because he talks about the struggle of being a kid directing a movie with a bunch of adults as your crew. Because they did not take him, the Grips particularly, did not take him seriously. And eventually he got to the point, which I respect this a lot, and I think it says a lot about his mentality as a filmmaker, is that him and I believe his producing buddy, about the same age, basically just started looking and observed about how to make these lights work and how to set them up. So then they started coming in earlier and setting up the lights and go, okay, well, if you're not going to do it, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that paved the way to lead to like Phantasm, you know what I mean? Because he was like, I did these two coming of age type movies, but then Phantasm, he gets a little bit more, he gets a little weird with it.
You know, I know he had issues with Phantasm 2.
Yeah.
You know, and not being able to cast who he wanted to, and I know there were a lot of other problems there.
The studio really started to kind of meddle with it.
That's why I feel like the closest thing that he's done to Phantasm after Phantasm was Bubba Hotep.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, he was kind of back in that indie. Not only is he back in the indie world, but also there are also layers to Bubba Hotep that I think are kind of connect to Phantasm.
You know what's kind of weird?
It's like the spiritual. I wouldn't call it the sequel, but like it's a spiritual offspring.
It's all about death.
I think so.
It's all about death and your legacy that you leave behind. All that.
Almost what's beyond death too.
Yes.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But
and
I
it
know
just wears his heart on its sleeve.
Yeah.
That's clearly my second favorite of his. I actually saw Bubba Hotep first before I saw Phantasm, you know? So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But quick little Don story is that when we met him at Frightmare, I remember that was the thing. That was the thing I said to him. I shook his hand and I said, man, I just want to say that Bubba Hotep is like one of the most underrated movies I've ever seen in my life. Original, just like everything I could have said. I just
all the adjectives.
I was just gonna shake his hand and say bye, but I just couldn't help myself. And there was like a moment where like, because I'm sure he's signing autographs all day, and he's like, yeah, thank you, thank you. But there was a moment he kind of just stopped, and he was just like, thank you. Like he was just like, he goes, you just made my day. And I was like, kick ass. I just made Don Coscarelli's day. And then I probably ruined it and then left.
He's such a humble, nice guy.
So nice.
And of course, for Bubba Hotep, we have to give Joe R. Lansdale, the author of that book, a lot of credit.
Of
but
course.
It's really lucky for us that that's probably a perfect pairing.
Yes.
You know?
I can't think of a better one.
No.
No.
I mean, that feels like it could have been written by Don,
Yes.
even though it wasn't, you know.
But I said, well, congratulations, Don. You know, this is the weirdest script ever written, I think. I mean, the opening sequence, the first line is, you know, I was dreaming of some infected pus on the head of his penis, you know, and that he would burst it by, quote, jacking off. And that's the intro to my character in this movie. So, you know, my first instinct was, where do I sign up, you know?
And same, I don't know if you guys have read these books, but the John Dies at the End series,
No,
I
never read them.
highly recommend them, seriously.
It's a cool movie.
No wonder they got Don Coscarelli.
Yeah.
Because apparently they went to the author and like, who do you think should make this? He was like, Don Coscarelli. And he was like, he's not going to go for it.
Wow.
And they called him up, and that's what it, yeah. One thing that I think is kind of underrated about Phantasm that people don't talk about enough is the score. I think the score is so good.
Iconic.
Iconic. But I feel like it doesn't have as much praise as it should. I feel like everyone, they talk about horror, they talk about Exorcist,
There's a very Tubular
Halloween.
Bells inspired feeling to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's so
But
good.
Yeah,
It's so good.
I love it, and I have a vinyl of it, and I think
Yeah.
I have a CD of it. But it's something that I'll
Yeah.
listen to.
Yeah, the
like,
main theme is great. Like if I'm writing, I put that on usually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
and like Goblin. I
Very,
put on.
yeah, very John Carpenter-esque like vibe, right? Just kind of not quite full synthesizer, but like traditional.
It feels like an
traditional
orchestra.
Music. Yeah,
It feels like an orchestra put it together.
but it has this kind of epic, kind of
Yes.
brooding.
It's so good.
Just like Halloween, you know, it's just got that theme that's
It
very
burns.
repetitious, but it's thematic. It's not Wagnerian where it's like gonna kind of like be a theme on each character.
No.
But it is very recognizable when it
Yeah.
comes in. It's like, oh, here's like,
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's just like, oh, fuck,
Right.
something's gonna go down.
And it being released in '79, you know, there's a pretty darn good chance that Coscarelli didn't even see Halloween until after
Sure.
Phantasm was completed.
Absolutely.
So that, you know, the fact that
he
those.
might even mention
Yeah, I
it
didn't
in
mean
the,
it was inspired by.
No, but that's what's
Carpenter,
interesting
But
is
maybe
that
Carpenter
they
was
were both
inspired
on
by
that same
Phantasm.
path. You know.
I think he
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
brings Halloween up in the book though, and just being like he had, he had no idea this guy was making this movie too, and like it's just like both these movies
Yeah,
came out and
yeah.
just explosions,
Yeah.
you know.
So, you know, Phantasm, obviously, like we've said, it swings for the fences. It goes weird, but it wears its heart on its sleeve. But one thing that, you know, in talking about first Frights and why, you know, for those reasons alone, I think it's a great first Fright. But one thing that I don't have an answer for is how this inspired. What are the lasting effects of Phantasm? Because it's one of those films that was unique when it came out, but it still feels very unique now.
Yep.
Because I don't know if another film has been able
It's
to
apples
kind
to
of,
oranges with
yeah.
everything.
Yes.
There's nothing that's going to sit next to it and be like, oh, well, you have these group of films, and
Right.
you have these groups. Phantasm's always going to be on a spine
Yep.
by itself.
Yep.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and that's what characterizes a success in my book. If it's something that could only be a film in no other format, like another piece of media, it's something can exist on its own. It follows its own rules, and it's entertaining. Then it's one for the ages, and we'll always go back
Absolutely.
to it.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
and that movie is the personification of those three things.
Yeah. And that's the power of Phantasm.
Yes.
Phantasm rules.
I love Phantasm.
As soon as you said Phantasm was your pick, I was like, fuck yeah.
I'll tell you, like, great.
Yeah.
The funeral is about to begin, sir.
You see the list of filmmakers that love Phantasm.
Yes.
And they just talk about it like, oh, I ripped that from Phantasm. And you're just like, what? So it's really, and I'm talking about old.
It's a good vibe,
Yeah,
too.
it's like old filmmakers and new filmmakers are like, oh, I love Phantasm.
And the common ground is always even if you find someone occasionally who doesn't like it, you can usually be laughing by the end of that conversation because it brings so much positivity.
It does.
Even though it's about death, even though it's about grief and loss,
But it's not a
there's
bummer.
so much in there to talk about, to unpack. It's so wild.
It's not
And
a
as
downer. It's not a downer of a movie,
no.
which
It's
is
not.
weird to think about.
It's one of those films where I wouldn't want to ever try to make a film but I wish that I could make a film that made people feel the way Phantasm makes people feel.
Yeah.
I think that would be the ultimate.
Yeah,
It really would. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in
There
that sense, Don really won. He
There
really
is like
did.
oh dude, totally. There is like a weird, like calming, like thing.
Because it's so clean too. The movie's almost a minimalist expression.
Yes.
You know, it's
There's
got
no
like
props that don't need to be there. There's no costuming
It's
that's
just
in your
him
face.
going from the house to the mausoleum.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yes.
It's a beautiful movie. The lighting is hard, but it's purposefully lit everywhere, and it's not like junk. It looks great, and everything has its purpose, and it's, like I said, very minimalist.
Yes.
The walls are minimal. There's not a whole lot going on. There's maybe a piece of art or something, like a sculpture or something in the mausoleum.
It's not a lot.
It's so minimal that it makes it feel kind of like a set. So you're like, I get the amateur vibe of this. You don't want to shoot at the ceiling. But at the same time, that minimalist gives you less to go on.
Yeah.
So you're in the mood.
Yes.
You're not like looking at like what books he has on his shelf or whatever. You're not bogged down by a bunch of details.
Yeah, and it plays into that idea that Mike is a lonely kid who's losing everyone he loves, and so we're going to be in that
nothing
space
to latch
with him.
onto.
Yeah.
There's nothing to latch onto.
Yeah. You're just with
He's
him.
desperately trying to latch onto something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's great. Whether that was an accident or on purpose, it works.
Yeah.
It works
What do you
great.
think, Crunch?
Crunch
what
loves it.
Yeah.
What about my pick?
Crunch is
What about Airbud? What about Snow Dogs?
Snow Dogs.
I want to be a snow dog.
Yeah, this guy's Sandlot. That's his pick.
He is, dude.
He's the beast.
He is the beast.
Well, cool.
So sweet.
I think we got it.
So sweet.
I think we nailed Phantasm. That was
Yeah,
great.
Okay, good.
That one's from the heart. That was great.
That was great.
Yeah.